The head of the regiment's husband died in the line of duty, and before his body was cold, I canceled his household registration without hesitation. 3 days later, on the same day as his twin brother's wedding with Diana, he resolutely remarried with his son, taking a high pension. Everyone cursed me for being cold-blooded, but I felt happy when I saw my brother-in-law with red eyes. It was only because, in the previous life, I recognized that the body sent back home was not my husband but his twin brother. When I ran to question him, I unexpectedly heard my husband and mother-in-law discussing that they would marry Xiao Diana, who had an engagement with my eldest brother, in 3 days. Mom, Ellie is very strong and we have a son, so she will definitely be fine. But Diana has been waiting for my eldest brother for so many years. If she knew the bad news about my eldest brother, she might have followed him. I was struck by lightning and wanted to expose the truth, but my husband knocked me out with his stick. He told everyone that I had gone mad because I was too sad and locked me in the woodshed. I watched him and Diana get married and consummate their marriage. What's more, because of Diana's disgust and fuss, my husband cried and looked for my son. I put sleeping pills in my son's food, and he never woke up again. On the day my son was hastily buried, I hanged myself in the woodshed in despair. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back in the day when my eldest brother's body was brought in. My son, why did you leave like this? What do you want me, an old woman, and your wife and children to do? My mother-in-law's shrill cries brought me back to my senses. My eyes fell on the body in the coffin that looked exactly like my husband Brian. I lowered my eyes, but my heart was filled with shock. I was actually reborn, and reborn on the day when my eldest brother Nathan's body was brought back. Yes, the person lying in the coffin was not my husband Brian, but his twin brother Nathan. In my previous life, when the news of Brian's death came, I cried my heart out and threw myself on his body, but suddenly discovered that he didn't have that red mole behind his ear. I immediately realized that Brian must not be dead, and the eldest brother who escorted the body back was my real husband. I felt happy to find that he was okay, but also confused as to why he did this. I was just about to ask for clarification, but I heard another heartbreaking truth outside my mother-in-law's door. Brian, are you really going to replace your brother and marry Diana in 3 days? My husband, who faked his death, spoke in a firm tone. Of course, Mom. My brother has been engaged to Diana for so long, and Diana has been waiting for him to come back. Now that something has happened to my brother, what if Diana is stimulated and follows him? You have watched Diana grow up. Can you bear to watch her die? It is better for me to marry Diana. In this way, the child will be registered under my brother's name, and he will have someone to kowtow to him at his grave in the future. My mother-in-law was a little moved, but still hesitant. What if you call Ellie like this? She is a woman, and your son is only 2.5 years old. Aren't you afraid that she can't bear it, or that she will remarry? Hearing what my mother-in-law said, Brian smiled. Mom, don't worry. Ellie is devoted to me. How could she remarry? She has a strong personality, and we have a son. Just for the sake of our son, she will definitely hold on. If I hadn't heard all this, I would indeed do as he said, stay in the Brian all my life and raise my son. But after knowing the truth, I just felt it was unfair. I pushed open the door angrily, intending to expose Brian's identity to everyone, but he was merciless and hit me on the back of the head with a stick. When I woke up again, I had been locked up in the woodshed. No one could answer my calls for help. Brian told everyone that my husband had died and that she had gone mad due to excessive grief. No one believed me anymore. In the woodshed, I watched him happily marry his childhood sweetheart, Diana. I also heard with my own ears that they consummated their marriage. And my 2.5-year-old son with him cried and howled because he couldn't find me, which affected Diana's sleep. Diana just complained once, and Brian was so cruel that he bought sleeping pills and put them in his son's food. The flesh and blood I gave birth to after 10 months of pregnancy died, less than 10 meters away from me. After my son's death, they didn't feel guilty at all. Diana took Brian's arm and looked down at me, saying, Sister-in-law, you have a really bad fate. You killed your husband and your son. If it weren't for my husband's plea, I would definitely not allow you to live at home. However, in order to put my mind at ease, he compensated me all your dowry on behalf of his brother. From now on, you just stay in the woodshed. Brian, who was standing next to her, said nothing, just looked at her with doting eyes. Only then did I realize that he married me, but he was always thinking about my childhood sweetheart in his heart. For her, he gave up his identity and family. In his eyes, my wife and his biological son were not even as good as a hair of Diana. I was angry and hateful, but I couldn't even escape from this small woodshed. I found a rope and hanged myself in despair. Before I suffocated, I was regretting why I married a beast like Brian. Fortunately, I was reborn, and there is still room for things to turn around. Didn't Brian make sure that I would stay in the Brian to take care of him for the rest of his life? I refused to do that. After making up my mind, I pinched my thigh, pretended to be heartbroken, threw myself on Brian, and cried so hard that I almost fainted. The relatives and friends who came to pay their respects couldn't help but shed tears. Alas, it's so pitiful. The family has lost its pillar. What should we do? Yes, if I remember correctly, Victor is only 2.5 years old this year. Oh my God. Brian's wife will have a hard time in the future. I accepted the pitying looks from the people around me, but my heart was getting colder and colder. The Brian relatives, who were just casual acquaintances of mine, all knew that it was not easy for a woman like me to be a widow, but Brian had never considered all this. With a word of tough character, he confidently told me to suffer. Even now, he just looked like it was none of his business. He arranged the funeral of Nathan and announced the wedding date with Diana in front of everyone. Some people were puzzled. Nathan, why are you in such a hurry? Your brother's body is still warm. Why are you in such a hurry to get married? Brian waved his hand. My brother and Diana grew up together. The last words he left behind were for me to marry Diana as soon as possible and give him a big fat nephew. When he dies, he will be the only one by his side. Of course, what he says is what counts. He used the will as an excuse. My mother-in-law and I both lowered our heads and didn't express our opinions. Even if others felt something was wrong, they kept their mouths shut. After everyone left, Brian took Diana's hand and blocked my way. Sister-in-law, I need to ask you for a favor. I know your dowry is quite generous. Can you lend me some gold jewelry to support Diana? Anyway, you have to observe mourning for my brother, so it's not good to wear gold and silver. On the surface, he said he was asking, but his tone clearly left no room for me to refuse. I secretly cursed him for being shameless, for making me a widow for no reason, and how could he have the nerve to think about my dowry? I glanced at Brian's strong muscles, but I wasn't stupid enough to break up with him directly. You're too polite, brother. We're all family. Of course I can wait until the wedding day, and I'll go and give it to my sister-in-law in person. Diana was so moved that her eyes were red. Brother Nathan, you're so good to me. You're the best man in the world. Brian chuckled and tapped her nose affectionately. What's this? I wish I could put all the good things in the world in front of you. Diana hit him with some shame and anger, with a bit of boasting in her tone. Hate it. My sister-in-law is still here. She just became a widow. Don't provoke her. Brian glanced at me. My sister-in-law is definitely not the kind of petty person. But sister-in-law, don't worry. You are the daughter-in-law of our Brian. Victor is my nephew. We will never treat you too unfairly in the future. Hearing this, a trace of dissatisfaction flashed in Diana's eyes. She didn't want her husband to take care of someone else's wife. At this time, my 2.5-year-old son Victor came out of the house, stretched out his little hand, and walked straight to Brian. Dad, hold him. Diana's face immediately turned ugly, and she stood between Victor and Brian. Victor, he is not your father, but your uncle. Victor raised his head, and his little head couldn't understand what she meant at all. He wanted to get closer to Brian, but Brian pushed him cruelly. I said, I'm not your father. Sister-in-law, you have to educate this child well. Fortunately, it's in my own home. If it was someone else, what if there was a misunderstanding? The family tradition of our Brian is very positive. Victor fell to the ground and burst into tears. I quickly helped him up. I heard Brian saying these things with confidence. I was so angry that I trembled all over. I endured and endured until I finally suppressed my anger. I will take good care of the child, big brother. Brian breathed a sigh of relief and then realized that he felt sorry for the child. He just stretched out his hand and wanted to touch Victor's head to comfort him, but Diana said, "Brother Nathan, you said you would go shopping with me. Don't waste time." Victor looked at the backs of the two people. His expectant eyes dimmed, and his crying gradually weakened. "Mom, Dad is gone. Does he not want us anymore?" My nose was a little sour. I raised my hand and gently touched my son's head. "Victor, that's not your father. Your father is dead and will not come back. Mom will find you a new father to accompany you, okay?" Victor still didn't understand what death meant, but looking at Brian, who never looked back, he seemed to understand and grabbed my hand and nodded. Brian didn't know that he was not the only one who had a childhood sweetheart in this world. I found an excuse to go out and called my childhood sweetheart brother Curtis, who I grew up with. When he found out that I wanted him to introduce someone to remarry, he got a little angry. "Is Brian not good to you?" Just one sentence was enough to make my eyes red. I briefly explained the situation and heard the sound of someone pounding the wall over there. "Okay, I'll introduce you to someone you can trust." I breathed a sigh of relief and just waited for the day when Brian and Diana got married to leave. From then on, I would have nothing to do with Brian. But before that, I still had a lot of things to deal with. Because she was Brian's widow, it was particularly smooth when I went to cancel his military status. I also took the pension that was issued and took out the part for my parents-in-law separately. I put the rest of the money in my own passbook. When I got home, I packed up all the things related to Brian over the years and stuffed them under the stove. When Brian came back with Diana, those things had already turned to ashes, but he didn't notice it. When he saw me in the kitchen, he subconsciously told me as before, "Ellie, make some pork chop noodles tonight." It was not until Diana pinched his arm that Brian came back to his senses instantly and coughed twice to cover up. "Diana, I remember my brother said that my sister-in-law's pork rib noodles are the most delicious. Let her make it for us to try." Diana's suspicious eyes turned around and around on me and Brian, and then she snorted coldly. "It's just pork rib noodles. What's the difference between who makes it? When we get married, I will learn to make it for you." Brian quickly took her hand and said, "No, I married you to let you work. Someone will do the housework. Just take good care of you and wait for you to give birth to a big fat boy." Diana was coaxed into a smile by his few words. The two of them walked into the house talking and laughing. I stood there, thinking about what Brian had just said, and couldn't help but sneer. My mother-in-law has always been in poor health, and he has to make money to support the family. Now Diana has to be taken care of. Who else can do housework besides me? It turns out that he actually wants me to work like a cow and serve their family. But even though I knew his plan, I didn't refute anything. After all, I had to leave in 2 days. I seemed to have no temper and let Brian and Diana order me around. Even my mother-in-law, who had long been persuaded by Brian's sweet words, couldn't stand it anymore and scolded them a few words. Only then did they restrain themselves. However, Diana has been spoiled by her family since she was a child. Even if she listened to her mother-in-law on the surface, she was still dissatisfied in her heart. When she was unhappy, she got angry with Brian, and Brian also spoiled her. Just after hearing her say a few words that her feet hurt when walking, she spent the money she had on buying a bicycle, and then a sewing machine, a refrigerator, and even a TV set that few people in the provincial capital would buy. When these big items were delivered to the door, Brian became the focus of the whole village. Everyone was shocked by Brian's lavish wedding. "Nathan, you spoil your wife too much. Buying these things is not cheap, right? Yes, so many big items. Marrying a city wife won't cost so much, right?" Brian just looked at Diana dotingly. "What's wrong with spending money? I just want to give Diana the best and make her the happiest bride." Many people were envious and jealous when they heard this. Some people saw me standing silently aside and deliberately provoked. "Brian is so wealthy. Brian must have spent a lot of money to marry Ellie." The smile on Brian's face froze. He lowered his head and didn't dare to look at me. I knew why he felt guilty. He sighed. "When Brian married me, I didn't ask for his betrothal gift. I didn't expect that I would say it so openly." The aunt who wanted to stir up trouble was also stuck. She laughed dryly twice. This might be because the conditions were not good at that time. She felt guilty after saying it. The 2 sons of Brian were in the army before. Now one of them died. The pension must be a lot. Marrying Diana with great fanfare is, of course, biased. Many people looked at me with more sympathy. Seeing that Brian was also thoughtful, Diana's eyes flashed. This is my inconsiderateness. I didn't consider my sister-in-law's feelings. It's my fault. Brother Nathan, take the things back. I don't want my sister-in-law to feel wronged. The guilt that Brian had just felt towards me quickly disappeared. She doesn't have these things. It's her bad luck. She doesn't deserve so much. What does it have to do with you, Diana? You're just too kind. Be careful not to be bullied by scheming women in the future. The implicit meaning of his words was that he suspected that I was jealous of Diana and deliberately put them there. I was too lazy to argue. I just watched him work hard to move the things into his and Diana's room, sneering in my heart. The money in Brian's hand was definitely not enough to buy these, but if the army pension was added, it would be more than enough. I thought he would ask me for it personally, but I didn't expect that it was my mother-in-law who came to me on the first day of the wedding. She glanced at my face cautiously and spoke after careful consideration. Ellie, you should receive Brian's pension. The amount of money is not small. Why don't you let your mother help you manage it? I frowned, looking incomprehensible. Mom, that's too troublesome. In a few years, Victor will have to go to school, and there will be many places to spend money. I ask you again and again if it's appropriate. The mother-in-law's eyes fell on Victor sitting on the Kong, and she seemed a little entangled. Of course, she really loves this grandson, but she may not have only this one grandson. After making up her mind, she stopped being reserved. Ellie, you are your daughter-in-law. Isn't it natural for me, as your mother-in-law, to help you manage the money? Besides, now is the time for the family to spend money. You can't just monopolize Brian's pension, right? His brother is getting married, so why don't you help him? Seeing that her ulterior motive was revealed and she told me her intention, I didn't refuse anymore. She wiped her tears and took out an envelope from her pocket with a cowardly look. Mom said, "These are the pensions for you and Dad. After the wedding tomorrow, I will give you the money I have saved." The mother-in-law touched the thickness of the envelope and nodded with satisfaction. She comforted me like Brian had promised me before. Ellie, don't worry. Even if Brian is gone, you will always be my daughter-in-law, and Victor will always be my grandson. Our Brian will not let you and your son suffer any grievances. By the way, the wedding banquet will probably be very busy tomorrow, and you are free anyway, so go to the kitchen to help cook. I nodded my head and agreed, and my obedient appearance made the mother-in-law very satisfied. Her mind was full of thoughts about going back to count the money, so she didn't notice that Victor and I had almost packed up our things in the room. The next day, before daybreak, Brian knocked on the door to wake me up, saying, "Sister-in-law, hurry up and cook. We have to prepare 10 tables of food later." He was in high spirits over happy events, and his tone was filled with the joy of getting what he wanted. I looked at the yard full of red wedding characters and smiled slightly. When Brian and I got married, he said that his parents-in-law were old and didn't like noise, so they didn't have a big wedding. Now it seems that it's not that his parents-in-law don't like noise, but that I'm not the one they have in mind. Brian noticed my absent-mindedness, hesitated for a moment, and seeing that there was no one around, he took out a small silver bracelet from his pocket. "I brought it when I was making jewelry for Diana. It's for you." He stuffed the bracelet into my hand without saying anything and sighed again, saying, "Sister-in-law, you've worked hard these days. I know the family can't handle it without a man. Don't worry. When this is over, I will discuss with Diana about the 2 rooms. It's almost time." He turned around to welcome the bride. I stood where I was, threw the silver bracelet on the ground in disgust, and stepped on it twice. Disgusting, really disgusting. When the word Jantel came out, I felt like I was stuck with a piece of dog. He was obviously my husband, but now he was treating it like alms. How could he be so shameless to say such things? Fortunately, the time is up and it's time for me to leave. As soon as Brian left with the people who came to pick up the bride, I carried Victor on my back and picked up the bag. I took a last look at the place where I had lived for several years. I had no more nostalgia and left quickly. Brian, who went to pick up the bride, was inexplicably nervous. Was it because he was too excited to marry Diana? He couldn't figure it out. This was not his first marriage. However, Diana and Ellie were different after all. Diana was the one he truly loved in his heart. As for Ellie, she was only suitable to be a wife. He thought he would never have the chance to marry Diana, whom he really loved in his life, but he never thought that something would happen to his eldest brother. He only hesitated for a moment. So, he decided to take over the identity of the eldest brother and continue to live. Diana is reasonable and should agree to him inheriting both houses. In this way, he would not have let Ellie down. Thinking of the days of living with his lover and wife, Brian felt a little smug until he picked up Diana and returned to Brian, only to see his mother stumbling out with a letter in her hand. "Oh no, Ellie, she's left with Victor and said she's going to remarry." Brian staggered and almost dropped Diana on his back. Others were also talking about it, but most of them were cursing his ruthlessness. Brian had only been gone for 3 days, and his body was still warm. How could Ellie remarry so soon? Yes, she took Victor away. After all, Victor is Brian's grandson. What she did was so unkind. Ellie is so ruthless. I didn't expect her to do such a thing. He couldn't hear what others said. The sounds around him turned into a buzzing sound. Only a few words echoed in his mind. Ellie remarried. How could she? How dare she marry someone else with his son? Diana was a little flustered when she saw him stop there. "Brother Nathan, can we finish our wedding banquet first? We will miss the auspicious time later." But Brian let her go. "Diana, no, I have to go find Ellie first. She is my brother's wife. How can she just remarry?" Diana's expression was distorted for a moment. "But she is just your brother's wife. Do you really want to delay our marriage for her? I tell you, Nathan, if you choose her, I will not marry you." Seeing Diana's temper rising, Brian, who always favored her, frowned this time. "Diana, stop making trouble. Wait here for me to come back." After he said this, he quickly ran to the village entrance and just caught a bus to the city. Brian got on the bus nervously, but after arriving in the city, he was in trouble again. Where should he go to find someone? He found the police station, but he was only the eldest brother of his late husband. They were not willing to help find her at all. He ran to the train station again. The staff said the same thing. "Her remarriage has nothing to do with you, eldest uncle. We can't help you find her." Brian could only leave in disappointment. But when he returned to the village, Brian was in chaos. The shop owners who had bought things on credit before came to ask Brian to settle the bills. The mother-in-law then remembered that she had said she would hand over the rest of the money on the wedding day, but now she had run away, so the money was naturally gone. Her eyes went dark and she fainted. The others could only ask Diana, who was wearing red, for the money. How could Diana take out so much money? She made a fuss for a while. When she saw Brian coming back, she quickly said, "My husband is back, you go ask my husband for it." So as soon as Brian entered the door, he was surrounded by debt collectors. He then remembered that the money he had on hand was not enough. At that time, he thought of using the pension to fill part of it, but now it had become a bubble. Brian's expression was a little embarrassed. "Dear bosses, can you give me a 2-day grace period? I am a little short of money now." As soon as he finished speaking, someone spat at him. "Why pretend to be a rich man when you are short of money? If you can't pay the money within 3 days, we will call the police to arrest you. Yes, you'd better not have any crooked thoughts." Brian had a smooth career in the army and became the regiment commander. After replacing his elder brother's identity and becoming a martyr's survivor, he was admired wherever he went. He had never suffered such humiliation, but even if he was unwilling, he could only smile. After finally coaxing her away, Diana began to be dissatisfied again. "Didn't you say that you would have money after getting married? Where is the money? How can you not even afford to buy things? Nathan, did I marry you just to suffer?" In the past, when she made trouble, Brian just thought it was fun. After tossing around for so long today, he couldn't help feeling a little tired in his heart. If Ellie was here, she would never make a fuss over such a small matter. After this thought came up, Brian thought more about her goodness and blurted out subconsciously, "Ellie can accompany me to suffer. Why can't you?" This sentence directly ignited Diana's rage. "What do you mean, Nathan? You like your own brother and sister? Do you have shame? You like that seductive little why did you marry me? Just inherit your brother's estate and let her be your wife. It would be great if you got a son for free." After she said this without thinking, she felt a little regretful when she saw Brian's livid face. But unexpectedly, when Brian opened his mouth, he said something that made her feel like she was falling into an ice cave. What do you mean by shameless? If it wasn't for faking her death in order to marry you, how could Ellie remarry with my son? Obviously, I am her husband. She should be with me for the rest of her life. Diana took a breath of cold air. Nathan, what do you mean? No, that's not right. You are Brian. She could never have imagined that her fiancé, who had been obedient to her in everything these days, was not her fiancé at all. Then her real fiancé must be dead. Diana rolled her eyes and fainted from the shock of the news. Brian looked at his fainted mother, then at Diana, who closed her eyes, lowered his head, and regretted it. What a sin he had committed. I knew nothing about the farce that happened in Brian's house. At this moment, I had already taken my son on the train to Beijing. Standing in front of the 3-story Western-style building, I held the address given by the neighbor's brother and hesitated for a long time until the door was pushed open and a man in a white shirt walked out. Before I could find a place to hide, my wrist was grabbed. Ellie refused to go in. Looking at Curtis's familiar eyes, I smiled awkwardly. I thought I had found the wrong place. Although I knew that he took advantage of the policy to do business in the South and made some money, I didn't expect that he would be so successful now. Curtis was the same as I remembered, without any airs. He stretched out his hand and picked up Victor skillfully. Victor was very familiar. He grabbed his arm and asked, "Uncle, are you the new dad?" I was about to answer when I saw Curtis nodded. "Yes, I will be your new dad from now on. Victor, let's go in and take a look at your room." I was a little dazed and didn't know what he meant. I followed him like sleepwalking and watched him make Victor giggle in less than 5 minutes. When Victor was tired and fell asleep on the small bed prepared by Curtis, I seized the opportunity to speak. "Brother Curtis, what did you mean by that just now?" Curtis smiled bitterly. "Ellie, can't you tell what I mean? I panicked, but this is not my first marriage, and I have a child. You are so good, you can find someone more suitable." Curtis shook his head, took my hand, and led me to another room. Only then did I realize that the neighbor brother who loved painting when he was a child had actually painted an entire room full of paintings for me. He looked at me, and the emotions in his eyes were almost overflowing. "At first, I wanted to give you these paintings to express my feelings, but after I got home, I found out that you were already engaged. At that time, you seemed to have a good impression of Brian, so I buried these emotions in my heart. I thought these things could only be sealed up in this life, but I didn't expect that Brian would treat you like this. Ellie, since you want to remarry, give me a chance, okay?" I took a deep breath and nodded. Curtis happily hugged me. He could hardly wait to file a marriage report and booked the best hotel for a wedding banquet. I thought Brian had given Diana enough, but I only found out now it wasn't a big deal. He was just putting on a brave face. Curtis was the one with real ability. When I put on the wedding dress shipped from abroad, I was still in a daze. Victor adapted very quickly. I don't know how Curtis coaxed him. Now he calls me Dad all the time. He is even closer to Brian than before. Seeing the father and son laughing and joking, my slightly uneasy heart settled down. People say that children are immature, but I know that children are the most sensitive. Curtis really loves Victor, and he is also sincere to me. This is the first time I have smiled sincerely since my rebirth. I walked towards my groom with my skirt lifted. When Brian found me, I had been married to Curtis for a month. He was standing downstairs at my house and shouted my name, "Ellie, Ellie." Curtis opened the door. Looking at Brian, who had messy hair and a depressed spirit, he raised his eyebrows. "Oh, isn't this Ellie's ex-husband's brother? What are you doing here?" Brian was choked by him and glared angrily. "Where's Ellie? I want to see Ellie and Victor. They're for my Brian. I want to ask her how she can remarry." Curtis answered him with a heavy punch. "You're crazy. You're just your elder uncle. Why do you care so much? Ellie remarries. Does she need your consent?" Brian felt guilty and spoke hesitantly. "I'm not Nathan, I'm Brian. Ellie is my wife. Why can't I care about her?" Curtis sneered. "You are Brian? Didn't Brian die a long time ago? Do you have any evidence to prove that you are Brian?" Brian was speechless. Of course, he had no evidence. After the showdown with Diana, He thought about restoring his identity, but when he found out from the army that his military status had been canceled long ago, from then on, there was only Nathan in the world, not Brian. But he still had expectations in his heart. Let me meet Ellie and Victor. They will definitely recognize me.
Curtis did not stop him this time.
Brian just walked into the house. Seeing the home appliances that were better than those he had chosen for Diana, a trace of jealousy flashed in his eyes. This jealousy reached its climax when he saw Victor and me with rosy faces. He rushed over and tried to grab my hand. Ellie, Victor, come back with me. I slapped his hand away. Nathan, are you crazy? I have remarried. Victor also followed up. Uncle, we are not going back. Dad is so good to us. When Brian heard our names, he collapsed all of a sudden. Don't you recognize me? I'm not Nathan, Ellie, look at me, I'm Brian, Victor. I'm your father, your real father. Seeing that Victor and I didn't change our expressions, Brian's heart suddenly skipped a beat. He thought Victor and I would be very excited to know the news. Why is there such a reaction? I curled the corners of my lips sarcastically. Uncle, what nonsense are you talking about? How can I not recognize the person who used to sleep with me? After understanding what I meant, Brian began to tremble all over. He suddenly understood why Victor and I were so silent during that time. It turns out that we already knew that he was not Nathan. Ellie listened to my explanation. It's not what you think. He was about to say something but was interrupted by Diana, who rushed in aggressively. Brian, you shameless thing. You actually came to find Ellie. Didn't you say you would be responsible for me? Hearing this voice, a trace of despair flashed in Brian's eyes. After learning the truth, Diana seemed to have become a different person. She disliked him all day long and always said that he was not as good as the eldest brother. When Brian couldn't stand it anymore, he remembered Victor and me, who used to wait for him quietly at home. That's why today happened. Unexpectedly, Diana found him. Victor, and I didn't intend to recognize him. Brian finally left with Diana. After they left, Curtis often asked people to inquire about the news. Diana and Brian completely became a pair of resentful lovers. The money they owed before, they almost borrowed from everywhere and asked relatives to barely pay it back. Diana also wanted to ask me to get the pension back, but was stopped by Brian. She mocked Brian, saying that he had done everything but was so shameless that he thought he could make up for it. Brian had nothing to refute and could only endure it. Diana said he was useless. He endured it. Diana beat him and scolded him, saying that he had ruined her life. He endured it too, until Diana said, "You deserved it for Victor and me to find someone else." Brian couldn't endure it anymore. His eyes were bloodshot and he strangled Diana's neck. Why do you say that? If it weren't for you, how could I have made that choice? It's all your fault. It's all your fault. I could have had a very happy family. Diana is also stubborn. Even at this time, she still doesn't forget to provoke him. What does it have to do with me? It's obviously you, who are being cheap. I just hooked you at the beginning. Who knew that you would still have feelings for me after you were married? Wasn't it your own idea to fake your death? Brian's eyes were getting redder, and his hands were getting stronger and stronger. Shut up, shut up. When he finally came back to his senses from his anger, Diana's face was already blue and purple. As soon as he let go, she fell limply to the ground. Brian strangled Diana to death. He knew that his life was completely over. When he was arrested and taken to prison by the police, he asked to see Victor and me, but I refused and only asked someone to bring him a message. It's great that you are the eldest uncle. Even if you have a criminal record, it won't affect Victor. Brian went crazy after hearing this. He told everyone that he was not Nathan but Brian. Unfortunately, his ex-mother-in-law died of anger after hearing the news that he was in prison. No one in the world believed him anymore. Even if someone in the village guessed something, they would just secretly scold him for being shameless. Brian likes to take on other people's identities, so he can only take this identity for the rest of his life until he dies. His name will not be engraved on his tombstone. Victor and I will live our lives well. Birds and fish have different paths.